All right, so y'all know by now that I am an animal lover. A couple of weeks ago, I had a conversation on this very podcast with my friend Leslie Marshall, and it kind of spun into a different discussion about potentially using AI to replace actual animals in research. It's something that I think would be a fantastic step. Now, listen, you might not agree with everything that PETA does. You might not fully understand their mission in every area. I understand that. But when it comes to protecting animals from needless experimentation, if we can find a better way, why wouldn't we? I'm all aboard that train. So joining me now is PETA Science Advancement and Outreach Director, Dr. Emily Trunnell. All right, Dr. Emily, this is important to me because I love the animals. So you got to tell me, is it possible that we could kind of change our whole way of thinking about animal testing and move to a better model, more effective, safe, would still get the job done and save the animals?
Absolutely. There's no question about it. And this is something that could have happened decades ago. We know that animal testing doesn't really work, in addition to being cruel to animals. So, 95% of new drugs, these are drugs that have gone through animal testing, end up failing in human clinical trials. So, we don't do a lot that fails 95% of the time and keep it going. There are, you mentioned AI. There are so many other methods that can replace the use of animals, and we just need to invest in that future and push people in that direction.
You'd think if we can put a man on the moon, that we could find a way to test things without having to abuse animals. And my biggest thing is here, I understand for some things that animals are used in all this. It's not just the use of animals, but it's the treatment of those animals that really disgusts me so much. And I think people were rightly outraged when there was a link between Dr. Fauci and these beagles that were being tested on. And it's just horrific to anybody who just loves animals, but especially the number of people in this country who love dogs. I mean, the fact that this medieval looking crap is still going on horrifies most people. And I know that you have obviously a lot of stories. I don't want to get too deep into them because I don't want to cry. But can you please tell my audience some of the treatment that these animals are getting and why it just has to end?
Absolutely. If I was talking to someone the other day, and if we had, closed caption cameras in animal laboratories, it would have ended decades ago, as it should have. Even at the NIH, the National Institutes of Health, there are horrific experiments happening on monkeys, for example. There is an experimenter there. For 30 years, she's been cutting into monkey skulls, injecting them with toxins, sucking out portions of their brain to cause brain damage. And then she puts these monkeys alone in a small metal cage. That's, what they know for their whole life, and then scares them with snakes and spiders. She's gotten $47 million of NIH funding, that's taxpayer funding, in 30 years, and not one treatment or cure has come from it. There's so many examples like this.
And it's horrifying and it makes me like actually so angry. I mean, the cruel treatment of animals to me is like, it really just burns my ass every time I see an example of it, whether it's animal testing or it's somebody just abusing an animal. I immediately respond death penalty. That's just me. Some people think that's extreme, whatever. I care about animals that much that's just my approach to a lot of this. But when people are getting all this money to do a lot of this research, we heard about it too. If you're Republican, Democrat, doesn't matter. In President Trump's joint session, he brought up some of the wasteful spending. And one of the things that he brought up is like the transing of mice, and people laugh at it. But some of these experiments, they pass off as like, we need this because, the knee replacements and the this, and we're studying cancer treatments and this. And some people, even if, they can put aside their compassion for animals, they're like, okay, this is a scientific necessity. But some of these things just seem like it's a brainchild of someone's demented, deranged self that wants to hurt and abuse animals under the guise of science. Do you find when you look at a lot of this stuff that the actual information and research that's gathered is pretty much just random crap?
Most of the time it is, unfortunately. So, I think most logical people would hope that there are laws and regulations that say, okay, if an animal is going to be used in experiments, we need to at least make sure that they're treated right, that they're not being used in experiments that are useless. But the laws do nothing. I mean, experimenters can do anything to an animal, and as long as they say that there's a scientific justification for it, it's not illegal. They can go ahead with it. And I'm so glad that this is being called out now. Trump's comments at the address, a lot of people in the scientific community were like, "Oh no, he meant transgenic." No, he was right. He meant they're scientists doing experiments on animals for testing treatments for transgender people, hormone, gender affirming care, and all those sorts of things. However you feel about that, that's research that doesn't need to be done on an animal. An animal's not transgender. And Alzheimer's disease, cancer, these are avenues of research that we need real human relevant methods to be used. We're not mice. We've cured cancer in mice hundreds of thousands of times, yet people are still dying every day. All of these things we need, good human relevant research, not, somebody's crazy idea of what they want to do to a monkey to get NIH funding.
Yeah, I think that's what's so crazy to a lot of folks is that they're able to get this amount of produce. It's like, oh, we just want to do this. And I think whether it's testing on animals or other areas of experimentation, we're throwing a lot of tax dollars and a lot of grant money at things. And, when we talk about cutting waste, fraud, and abuse, it's like the most Americans don't want to be spending their money on this stuff. They want to cure cancer. They want to help people with dementia and Alzheimer's and all those things, but they don't want to just be funding somebody's, curiosity for no real purpose, no tangible purpose. So that's really frustrating for folks. And there's also discussion about medical students, how they practice on animals or they do things, of that nature. And a lot of people are like, okay, I understand that needs to be done. We'd rather have them practice on animals before they practice on human beings. What can you tell us about that and how that very idea narrative might be overused and abused?
There are, historically, animals have been used in medical training and for biomedical research, but that doesn't need to happen anymore. We don't use rotary phones anymore. We have iPhones. There's so much technology available. Even for medical students, there are simulation models. There are physical, human, very lifelike models that can be reused. There are a ton of methods now. We don't have to conduct, medical training on animals. We are obviously like animals in certain ways. We have certain organs, but, if you have a surgeon who was trained using a pig and they go into a human and things are in kind of a different place, that's not something you want either. So you want those medical students and residents to be trained on human anatomy. They're meant to treat humans.
Yeah, cadavers just seem better. What about AI? How much can AI help in this pursuit?
AI can help a ton. So I kind of see AI as an adjunct, a helper to a lot of the new cell-based tools that we have available. So we have tools like organoids and organs on chips. These use, human cells that you can take from a skin sample from a patient who has a disease and program them into a 3D culture in a dish or into a small device called an organ on a chip that's about the size of a computer memory stick. And these actually contain the patient cells or human cells and can be used to study that disease or treatment in an actual, human biological environment. And AI really augments these things, right? Because you can run a whole bunch of tests on these organoids and organs on chips, and then AI can help you parse out that data, decide where to go next. There are just so many options available now.
In terms of what the United States funds and some of this grant money and the research that's done here, I can only imagine in other countries it's far worse. Are there any guardrails that other countries have established to protect animals? Anybody doing a better job? And I fear that many countries probably do a worse job. What can you tell us?
You're right about that. Many countries do a worse job than the U.S. as far as animal welfare regulations. And the scary and completely, baffling thing is that a lot of U.S. taxpayer money actually goes to those foreign institutions to pay for those tests on animals. And, we don't have any oversight in those countries. So one example, like in Australia, there were grants that the NIH funded in 2023 to addict dogs to opioids. We funded experiments on Canada to addict mice to amphetamines. in Sweden to cut rabbits' spinal cords and put them on a platform to do neurological experiments. These were all paid for with US taxpayer dollars. But fortunately, we have Representative Trunnell and Dinah Titus just reintroduced a bill called the Cargo Act. It's the Cease Animal Research Overseas Act. It's House Resolution 1085. And what that would do is prohibit the NIH from funding animal experiments in overseas laboratories, because that's a huge problem, right? We're sending money to foreign countries for so-called scientific research that's not getting anything, but also we have no oversight in their laboratories, that the US doesn't send people over there to check that, the animals are being taken care of. I mean, it's a horrible system. And so the Cargo Act would help eliminate that. And it's been reintroduced just a month ago.
Yeah, I'm fully on board with that one. I think this should be a bipartisan issue, frankly. And if there's one thing we should all be able to connect on, it's especially saving animals from needless experimentation and horror and abuse. And it really bothers me. People saw those images of those beagles, as I mentioned earlier, and it horrified a lot of people. To PETA's knowledge, is there a way, when these animals are used for experimentation, for me, I'd like to break into the laboratories and just steal the animals. I'd go to jail for that. Happily. Put my mug shot up. Like, I don't care. I would do it any day of the week. But is there a way that people can get involved in maybe saving some of these animals that are being used for experimentation? If they're not useful for experimentation anymore, can people go and try to save these animals? Is there a way to go about that, or at least assist in that effort?
I think the biggest thing is stopping the pipeline. There are efforts to get animals rehomed after they're not useful to the laboratory experimenters anymore. Some of those work well. Sometimes that can happen with monkeys or dogs, but the majority of animals are just killed at the end of experiments. Sometimes that's because the scientists say, we need to cut the animal open to, inspect the brain to see how our treatments changed what's going on in the brain. But so many animals, dogs, cats, mice, rabbits are bred for use in laboratories. 110 million animals are used in US laboratories every year.
Wow.
So stopping the flow of animals into laboratories is really the way to make it so that animals don't continue to be, cruelly tormented in laboratories. And we have a plan that we released in January this year called Research Modernization Now. And it's the first comprehensive, common sense plan that would save taxpayer funding, increase the efficiency and effectiveness of biomedical research, and save so many animals and patients at the same time.
Well, I love that. In the remaining time I have with you, I think PETA gets a bad rap. I honestly do. I mean, people hear PETA and they're immediately like, oh, it's just the people that are, throwing, paint on celebrities, or they're protesting fur or whatever. Like, PETA just gets a bad rap of just being more activist driven. And so people often are like, oh, PETA just wants everyone to be a vegan and all this. And, I'm sure that there are some in PETA that would prefer that, as a way of life for people. But what can you dispel for us about PETA as an entire organization? Because when people hear the name, they just go to one thing and they have one connotation. It might not be accurate.
Yeah, thank you for addressing that. So, at the core of everything that PETA does, whether it's shocking or silly or serious, is the very serious issue that we're simply trying to eliminate cruelty. Nobody likes animal cruelty. And by getting conversations started, sometimes you have to kind of shock people or say things that, that engender debate to kind of break through the noise. So I think when people actually take a look at the work that PETA does, at the animals that PETA saves, and all of our victories, I think most people would see that there's a lot of common ground. We're trying to eliminate cruelty. We have a strong track record of that, and it's something that we get a lot of support for on both sides of the aisle. And it's pretty 50-50, especially when it comes to animal testing.
Yeah, I mean, especially just protecting animals. I mean, protecting animals from cruelty and abuse, that's paramount to me, and I fully support that mission. I think where people get a little bit lost in the narrative is when PETA is like, oh, don't call this team this name because it's disparaging to animals. And people are like, listen, the animal's not getting hurt here. Or like, don't have the mascot that's a human being dressed up in a costume. We're like, okay, listen, this is harmless fun. So I think that it gets a connotation of that rightfully or wrongfully, and people, they go to that level and they think of it. But protecting animals from cruelty, I really do believe is a bipartisan thing, and some people are willing to go farther than others and further than others, but I think it's a noble endeavor, and I would hope we could all get beyond that. I'd also like to point out that my dress is not real leopard or cheetah. It is definitely not. As I'm saying this, I realize I'm wearing an animal print. I am culturally appropriating the animal, but it is out of love and inspiration, not out of cruelty or mockery.
That's the way to do it.
Exactly. So just in wrapping this up, for people that are like, listen, I want to get to know a little bit more about what PETA is actually doing beyond the renaming of things to actually protect animals from cruelty, where can they go and how can they get involved?
Absolutely. So anyone who is really passionate about this issue, wants to save taxpayer money, wants to get animals out of laboratories, wants more medical breakthroughs, they can learn all about our Research Modernization Now plan at PETA.org/RMN. That's PETA.org/RMN. That's for Research Modernization Now. You can read the report, the full report, which is it's a big, 46-page scientific document, but there's a summary there as well. And we even have a form online. You can contact your member of Congress and let them know you want to support this plan and you want to, put the U.S. biomedical research in the 21st century, not in medieval times.
We do not need to be spending hard-earned taxpayer dollars transing mice. And that is a bipartisan message, I hope. Thank you so much, Dr. Emily, for being here, for explaining all this to us. I really appreciate it. And thank you for doing whatever you can to save the animals. It's a joint effort that I would love to be a part of with you. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Tomi. It's wonderful to be here.
Thanks so much. All right, folks, listen, we all want to protect the animals. I hope we all want to protect the animals from abuse and cruelty. If they don't need to be used in medical experiments, let's not use them in medical experiments. And let's bust out all the beagles and let's put maybe Dr. Fauci behind bars. Who knows? That's just my wish. That's just a wish in my mind. But thank you guys so much for watching this special episode of Tomi Lahren is Fearless. Of course, you can catch us Monday through Friday, 1 p.m. Eastern on outkick.com, on Fox News Digital, on Facebook, on X, and of course, at the YouTube channel at Tomi Lahren is Fearless. From Nashville, God bless. Take care. Hey, thanks for watching. If you want more of my hottest takes, must-see conversations, and of course, my final thoughts, click here and make sure you subscribe here so you never miss a beat. I'll be here every weekday, and I hope you'll join me.